Hello. How's it going? Here for another tour? Good, because that's what I'm here to do. We're doing a tour today of Alphabet City. Right now I'm actually in Tompkins Square Park. I'll talk about that all in a second, so chill out. But before we start, just a quick reminder, go ahead and like the video, give it a little thumbs up. Go ahead and please subscribe, that helps out a lot. And also too, if you've seen these videos before, this would be a good time to mention the Patreon. Please check out my Patreon. That is how I fund these videos, how I hope to improve them, etc. There's some extras on there, so it's very cool. All right, enough of the business. I don't like spending too much time on that. I think we got a good walk today. Alphabet City is a very cool part. It's the east part of the East Village. A lot of cool history here, a lot of interesting history that people don't know about. So we're going to do this area. I used to live in this area, so it's a little plus. You ready to do this walk, Phil? What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
We're cranking them out this week, baby. This is the second one in the span of a week, so I don't know. I guess we should just get started, huh?
Yeah, let's go for it.
You have any notes right now, Phil?
No, that's perfect.
Great. Well, then why don't we just start this little shindig? Let's go. So we're walking through Tompkins Square Park. This is kind of the little main park here in the East Village and in Alphabet City. It stretches from 10th Street in the north to 7th Street in the south, from Avenue A to Avenue B, named after Daniel Tompkins. I talked about all this in the East Village video, really, so I don't want to repeat it. In here, there's an important memorial to the General Slocum, which I will also talk about in a little bit. But this park has a big history here in the neighborhood, a big history of protest. We'll talk about that too as we get out. I'm not going to cover really Avenue A. I'll mention it as we go, but I covered that in my East Village video. If you want to check all that stuff out, go to the East Village video. All right?
Sick plug, baby.
All right, Phil. All right, but anyways, we're walking here onto Avenue B, and I'm going to talk to you guys all about that. So Alphabet City is actually a relatively new name to kind of carve out these avenues that have letters on them as opposed to numbers from these are included in the grid, but they go further east, so they don't have any corresponding avenues that go all the way up, so they just gave them letters. So they're kind of off the grid, but they're not. They were included in the grid of 1811, which I've talked about 1 billion times, so I'm not going to repeat it, but we've given the name Alphabet City fairly recently. I think they were saying that the most recent time that they named it the Alphabet City was in like the 1980s. Ed Koch, actually, in an op-ed, mentioned it as Alphabet City. But before that, it was always just part of the East Village or the Lower East Side. And yeah, it's Avenue A, B, and C, and D. So I'm going to show you guys a couple things over here, and then we're going to keep walking. So now we're on Avenue B. Important thing to keep in mind is that this neighborhood, all the way up until, fairly recently, was not a good place to be. Very dangerous place. A lot of drugs in this neighborhood. We'll talk about that here, but that kind of is related to this. Here to the right, you have the Charlie Parker house. So Charlie Parker was one of the actual pioneers of bebop, a style of jazz. In fact, Miles Davis once said of Charlie Parker, you can tell the history of jazz in 4 words. Louis Armstrong, Charlie Parker. So he's a pretty important guy. He died at 34 years old, pretty young, very sad. They got the name, his nickname was Bird, or Yardbird, because supposedly on tour one time, he was on tour and the bus hit a chicken in the street. And he was like, hey, stop, and he had them back up, pick up the chicken, and make it for dinner. So, because they're called Yardbirds, so they nicknamed him Yardbird. In fact, Birdland in Midtown is a jazz club is named after him because he was actually one of the people that they wanted as one of the regulars when it was opened. That's his house. That's where he lived. All right, pretty cool. Nice brownstone. So now we're walking on Avenue B. I'm going to try to stand straight. I have a problem with slouching. Have you ever noticed that, Phil? I slouch too much?
Not really, no.
I feel like I slouch. It's good to have good posture, and I got to try a little harder. All right, that's enough of that. So over here, we're walking down Avenue B now. So another thing I was saying was how it used to be dangerous. Here to the left, I can't forget this. Here to the left, you have the Christodora. This is the Christodora. So this was built in the 1920s, originally like a tenement for, I guess, the poor and the immigrants here. It's pretty big building. But then in the 1980s, it was bought by a developer, and then it was turned into luxury apartments. So it kind of became a symbol of, quote, gentrification in the neighborhood. Then in 1988, there was a huge riot here because they were trying to impose and enforce curfews in the park. But here at Tompkins Square Park, that really affected disproportionately the homeless and the minorities of the neighborhood. and they were kind of a neglected group there where there weren't city services adequate to help these people, drug addicts, etc. So when they tried to enforce this curfew, there was a huge riot. The police beat the people back and fought them all the way back into the neighborhood. And the riot ended pretty much at like 6 in the morning there at the Christodora with, things being thrown through the windows, breaking glass, all that stuff. But some of the famous people who've lived there, Iggy Pop lived there. Who else? Freddie Johnston lived there. You guys know Freddie Johnston? He's the guy who sang the song Bad Reputation. You know that song, Phil?
Yeah.
It's the one that goes, I know I got a bad reputation, and it isn't just talk, talk, talk. You know that one?
I thought you were talking about the Joan Jett.
No. It's a different one. It's a good song, though. So here to the left, you have the former lodging house, the Tompkins Square Lodging House. This was actually started by the Children's Aid Society for bootblacks and newsies. It was like an orphanage. The Children's Aid Society, a very famous group here, started by Charles Loring Brace. Another thing that it was famous for was what they called the orphan trains. Orphan trains were basically sending orphans to other parts of the country to be put with, foster homes pretty much. It's like the predecessor to the foster home system. Here to the left, this is a cool church too. St. Bridget and St. Emmerich. So this was built in 1849. I can keep walking before we get a copyright strike on that song. People blaring their music gives me copyright strikes. So anyways, that building was built in 1849, pretty cool church, but it also harkens back to what this neighborhood used to be. This neighborhood used to be part of Klein Deutschland. I also talked about this in the East Village video, but it was Little Germany. That's right, ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch. But this was all Germans. Like at one point, like the 1890s, it was like 250,000 Germans here. It was 1/4 of the population of New York. So it was a big deal. The Germans were pretty much here until the early 1900s, when they were kind of switched out pretty much for Jews and for Eastern Europeans. They left because of the General Slocum disaster, which was, before 9/11, was the deadliest accident in New York City, accident or loss of life in New York City history. It's when the General Slocum, which was this little ferried boat that they got to take women and children to a picnic from one of the churches here in the neighborhood on a weekday, sank north in the East River, and over 1,000 people died. Real pick-me-up. Maybe we should continue the tour. Here, check this out. This is cool. This is Horseshoe Bar. So this bar has been here for a very long time, but it's famous for being in tons of movies. In fact, like Crocodile Dundee, the scene where where he's talking to the drag queen, and he's talking like the prostitutes outside. The strangulation scene in Godfather 2 happens here. Let's see, Russian Doll, the recent show, just filmed here. The Verdict. A lot of movies have filmed in here. Pretty cool. Great bar. So we could go down 7th and get over to the corner of 7th and A, which is where a few really cool spots are located. Ray's Candy Shop, Ray's Candy Store, Niagara, which used to be A7, which was where the hardcore movement was born here in New York. Pyramid Club, which unfortunately just closed down recently, sadly. Yeah, Pyramid Club closed. That's where like RuPaul got her start, where Nirvana, Red Hot Chili Peppers used to play. Here to the left, you have East Side Ink. I think this is pretty interesting. So East Side Ink, really popular, tattoo parlor. I guess like the Avengers got their tattoos to commemorate making the movie The Avengers there. But more interestingly, I think people don't realize that tattooing was actually illegal in New York City till 1997. It was illegal from the 1960s to 1997 because of the outbreaks of different diseases and the sanitary conditions. It's kind of interesting. Did you know that, Phil?
I had no idea.
1997, man. So it was all done like underground. So here to the left you have two. I'll show you this right here. You have one of the community gardens. So these are very common in Alphabet City. This is something you won't find much in other parts of the city. These are what are called community gardens. Now, we'll stop by another place a little later where I talk more about this. But community gardens were basically lots and buildings that were bombed out in like the 70s and 80s. And what happened is people in the neighborhood just basically started to inhabit them. They would live there, they would turn them into gardens and do all kinds of things to make them nice and keep them nice, right? Now, the problem is it wasn't their land. But this is where it gets into like squatters issues, like squatters' rights. land has to be productive, and if no one's going to take care of the land, well, the squatters do, and if they're there long enough, it kind of becomes theirs. They have a right to the land, to live there, to work on it. So you have lots of those community gardens here, but once the neighborhood started to turn nice, those people started to get the boot, and there were lots of violent, you know, confrontations, if you will. Yeah, that's a pretty a pretty benign way of putting it. Confrontation. Someone gets their teeth knocked out. This is a really cool building. I love this building here on 4th. That's just a funny looking building, the purple building. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's kind of a funky building. So we're walking down now B. Now, because this neighborhood was so dangerous in the, I guess you get on this side, you see all this. Because this neighborhood was so dangerous in the like 60s and 70s, there was a funny saying. They used to say that if you were, and the further east you go, the more dangerous it got. And that was because you were getting away from the subway, you were getting away from mass transit, so people with money didn't want to live there. So the further east you went, the worse it got. So they had a saying where if you were on A, you were all right. If you were on B, you were brave. If you were on C, you were crazy. And if you were on D, you were dead. Go figure. And it's interesting because George Pendle, who is an author who lived at the Christodora, said that as the neighborhood was changing, those letters also started to change. And he said it turned into, if you were on A, you were affluent. If you were on B, you were bourgeoisie. If you were on C, you were comfortable. And if you were on D, you were decent. Isn't that kind of funny? Now, it's interesting, too, to note, I was talking about how this used to be a German neighborhood. You have lots of I guess, here on 3rd, for example, if you take a right, you get to a really beautiful church. I'll see if I can show you the tops of it. But the church here was a Catholic church. There were lots of Protestants, but also Catholics that were German. And in fact, at the time in the mid-1800s, this was the Germans represented the second largest Catholic denomination in New York City. So we're going to take a left here. But like I said, the denominations of people here started to change. So once the Germans started leaving in like the early 1900s, that made way for the Jewish people who came. A lot of Jewish people came, as did Eastern Europeans. Get on this side over here. Poles, Polish people. Oh, give me a flat tire there, Phil. Here to the right, I wanted to show you this real quick. This is a restaurant, Poco. This is where I do my weekly show. Oh, sick plug, baby. Although you can't really go to it right now. It's a weekly live show before the pandemic. But it's coming back. Mark my words, it's coming back. Really cool little downstairs space. Did it for 4.5 years. Doing shows like this, trying to just make it work. Look at this cool little garden here. See another little garden? Here we go. This is what I wanted to show you too, right here. So in the early 1900s, in 1917, a law was passed called the Jones Act here. And what it did was it basically kind of created like this fluidity of movement between Puerto Ricans and the rest of the mainland United States. And what it did was it allowed for them to move between different states, and it gave them this access to the country because it was, you know, they acquired it during the Spanish-American War of 1898. But the Puerto Ricans started to come here in big numbers, actually, into this neighborhood. In fact, you'll see here real quick soon, you'll see on Avenue C, it's nicknamed Loisaida. It's because that's how the Puerto Ricans pronounced Lower East Side, Loisaida. I live in the Loisaida. But this is the Nuyorican Poets Cafe, and this was started in the early 70s by a man named Miguel Algarin. He started in his apartment, and then it grew to a bar nearby, and then they started this space in the early 80s. Really cool place, lots of poetry, readings, plays, music, awesome spot. All right. Yeah, there's a fire nearby. Save it, buddy. Sorry, is that insensitive?
No, it's fine. I was just...
All right. Anyways, we're going to go inside and check it out and talk to some people here. This is a really important venue and spot here in the Alphabet City. I was going to say Lower East Side, but it's Alphabet City now. All right, let's go. All right, so I'm here at the Nuyorican Poets Cafe with Advocate of Wordz, one of the hosts here. How's it going?
I'm good. I'm happy to be in the cafe. We've been closed for a while, so I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys let us in here. Thanks so much.
No problem. You are going to pay us, right?
Yeah, I'll pay you at the end.
All right.
So how long you been with the cafe?
I personally started coming here in 2003. I was working downtown near the World Trade Center. I'd been new there. After September 11th, they let people go. And like a lot of New Yorkers, I felt like I needed to reclaim my city. I finally had the courage to get on stage and start doing it. And I've been hooked ever since.
What'd you do before?
Like I said, I was working at the insurance firm. I really had no direction.
So you went from insurance salesman to poet.
Yeah.
Wow, that's quite a shift.
Yeah, a huge shift, a positive one. I felt better about myself when I went to sleep at night.
Well, they do say that insurance salesmen are the poets of corporate America, right?
I've never heard that.
It's because no one's ever said it.
Okay.
Yeah. I actually left law to do this, to do comedy and to do all this stuff. So I was a lawyer before, so I get it.
Wow, I feel sorry for your parents. They must be.
You know what, man?
I'm joking.
Hey,
I'm joking.
everyone says that.
Social
I get it.
distance.
Yeah,
sorry.
no, you know what? If you want to know how they feel about it, you should ask them because they stopped talking to me a long time ago. So you know, it's fine. What made you choose poetry out of all different types of art?
Because where I grew up in the Bronx, I was fascinated with hustlers and their language and how they spoke. And I was like, oh, I saw what you did there. So I was always interested in that stuff. So now I literally get paid to talk shit. I hope I could curse. Is that okay? We're in New York.
Yeah, well, it's encouraged, frankly. We should be cursing every other word. Why do you think the Nuyorican is so important to this neighborhood?
The founders felt like that our voices weren't being heard, that the culture's voices weren't being heard. There was no internet. We didn't have access to many of the small theaters. Broadway wasn't calling us. Hollywood wasn't calling us. And they felt like, we need to build a place because there are important voices here. And we want to invest in that. The cafe has, and it attracts, big Broadway talent, but there is still that intimate feel. Yeah. You're never more than 60 feet away from the performer.
I mean, that's one of the beauties of New York, too. I mean, you can go to comedy shows, music shows, and you're the performers who you see on TV, they're all over the world, they're performing right in front of you. Yeah, you're getting their spit on you as they're performing. Right?
Yeah, that's why we say, yo, spit that poem, poet.
Yeah, because they're literally spitting it on you.
They are.
So as a successful poet yourself, what advice would you give to someone who wants to go into the arts, whether it be poetry or music or comedy? What would you tell them?
I think an audience, especially with a live performance, they want something genuine. And that's what I would say. Go up there. If you're nervous, don't try to hide it. An audience will forgive you for being nervous as long as you're sincere. And I think it'd be better if you put it out on Front Street. And that shows courage, right? Like, in order to be brave, you have to be afraid of something, right? So it's like, you're not going to be given courage points for eating ice cream unless you're lactose intolerant.
Which you get a lot of points in that case. And so do your roommates and people who have to share the bathroom with you.
Yes.
So, Wordz, how have you seen the neighborhood here change? How has it changed to you?
There's a lot of money being poured in. And unfortunately, that means that there's a lot of natives who are getting pushed out. And they're not getting a piece of that money that's coming into the neighborhood. But places like the Nuyorican Poets Cafe, which can be an outlet for the people, it gives them a different option. Any of us with an idle mind, start making wrong decisions.
That's right, and idle hands are the devil's workshop.
Yes.
Some would say. A poet would say. Well, what's the first step to becoming a poet?
First step to becoming a poet is to be brave and have an affinity for words and language. Yeah. There is this quote that says, poetry is chief amongst the arts. It is the easiest to dabble in and the hardest to master. And I feel like, anyone can get involved in poetry.
So who are some of the more influential acts and more interesting poets or performers you've seen here?
So there's been a lot, but then we've also had performers like John Leguizamo come through. Some hip hop artists have performed here, like a while ago, Mos Def, Talib Kweli. That's what I personally love about the cafe, and people like me here. They don't like me in many places, but they like me here. God bless you all.
You got to go to the places where people tolerate you and like you. I think that's the key to life. Just look for the places where you're accepted. So what's your favorite part of the neighborhood aside from the Poets Cafe?
Houston Street. It's live. I'm a New Yorker, so I'm more comfortable when there's a lot of activity. When things are quiet, that's when I get afraid. That's when I get afraid. In New York, you could be on the subways and you're so close. And you're not even recognizing each other, And what's great about the cafe, too, is that, when you kind of come in, you don't fully let go of being a New Yorker, but at that point, you kind of do. It's something about this place, you start talking to people, and you know, like we're doing right now.
Well, it's because you're at your home.
Yes.
The key to surviving here is finding a home for yourself. Otherwise, like you said, it's all noise, it's all people, it's all isolating. But you find a home within New York, you won't find anything like that anywhere else in the world, because it's a home within this place of chaos. It's even that much more of a breath of fresh air, right?
Yeah, you are a poet.
I really am a poet. Maybe I should give this poetry thing a shot.
I think so.
Welcome to New York. Can I show you around? Can I show you around? Can I show you around? Why? Why not? I got the key to all the doors. What is a tour guide? A guide who tours. I'd like to see you beat that, advocate of words, whatever that means.
I'm a grandson of the first of the Nuyoricanos, direct descendants of Uncle Sam's draft picks of Latinos, by way of Spanish assimilation of the Tainos, whose prior culture was influenced by both African and Asian traders. Primo, I am both deceitful pillager and peaceful villager. I'm the Eurocentric immune system surviving the cold, Arawak beauty that was enslaved and sold. I am deadly arrow, belly of the beast with the smallpox cure. My people's blood is so mixed, but our soul is just so pure. Now I live at the top of the metropolitan's grid, swinging from coconut palms to city light post as a kid. So when you checking for words, cousin, know who you seeking. I am and always have been a Nuyorican.
Okay, that was a little bit better than mine. All right, thanks for having us. I guess I'll get back to the tour.
It was a lot better.
I know. Well, that was pretty cool. Let's keep moving. So I was saying the Puerto Ricans started coming here too, also in the mid-1900s, after World War II. In 1952, actually, Puerto Rico was made a Commonwealth, and there was actually a lot of push to get Puerto Ricans to come here because there was a surplus of labor in Puerto Rico, and they wanted to make their lot easier. Let's go on this side. It's too much shade here. So they actually pushed people to move here. So you had lots of Puerto Ricans coming here to get their manufacturing jobs and the industry jobs in New York. Problem was, those were disappearing. They were leaving. I've talked about this in a billion videos, how manufacturing jobs and industry jobs were leaving New York after World War II. And because of this, they lived in poverty here. They didn't have any jobs. It was a real issue. So they lived in neighborhoods like this, and these were tough neighborhoods at the time. So now we're walking Avenue C. You can see there it says Loisaida. That was nicknamed in the late 80s to commemorate the Puerto Rican. It's kind of cool. Did you know that's what it's pronounced, Phil? No. Loisaida. So we're going to take a left here, head up Avenue C. I'm trying to stay in the light here. So I've talked about Puerto Rico too. Watch out for that, don't trip. I've talked about Puerto Rico and well, I actually did a video on Puerto Rico. You should check that one out. I went to San Juan, Puerto Rico. So you should, yeah, baby. Cool. And you guys probably wonder why I do these plugs or whatever. It's just so, you know, so I don't have to repeat everything every time. So relax, okay? Not, you know, people do them in other videos. I'm just trying to do them in mine. I'm just aware that it sounds annoying to just, hey guys. Here to the right, I wanted to show you guys a place called Casa Adela. This place was opened in 1976 by a woman named Adela. She was actually this woman who cooked the food here. She actually recently passed away, but it's an amazing Puerto Rican food spot. See if we can pop in and get some food. All right, we got a little empanada. Can you hear me chewing, Phil?
Not too much, no.
Good, because I'm going to keep chewing. The place is really popular in the neighborhood. Some of the people who used to go there are from the neighborhood around this area. Luis Guzman, Rosario Dawson. Kind of cool. It's been there since the 70s. So we're still on Avenue C. In the dark again. Sorry, Phil.
No, it's fine.
Okay. So we're on Avenue C, which, like I was saying, is called Loisaida, which I think is kind of funny, actually. because they basically named a street after the way an ethnicity mispronounces a word. I don't think you can get away with that today. It's like you're gonna call the government. It's gonna be like, press 1 for English, press 2 for Spanish. It's kind of messed up, right? That's okay, man. Yo hablo español. Yo soy latino. No me frieguen, por favor. All right, let's keep walking. So this neighborhood, like I was saying, used to be a little more dangerous than it is today. I was here when I first moved here. I was walking through the neighborhood with my girlfriend. I just gotten like a milkshake. It was like 3 in the morning. And these 2 giant guys were walking in the opposite direction of us. And as they walked by, one of the guys just reaches down and smacks the milkshake out of my hand onto the ground. It didn't spill. So I immediately picked it up. I turned around. The guy didn't even look back. I thought about like unscrewing the top and just throwing it at his back and running. But I probably wouldn't be here today. It's a pretty cool historic building here. It was built for a bank. So this is an interesting restaurant here too. It's called Kafana. It's a Serbian restaurant. It's pretty good. But like I said, a lot of Eastern Europeans here as well as Puerto Ricans and stuff. Over here to the left, you have more of these community gardens here. One here and one here to the right. Like I said, this is something that's very unique to this neighborhood. You're not going to find these community gardens in other parts of Manhattan here. But it's very cool. You got all these like little, they're contributed to from the neighborhood. It's a nice little respite. People can come here and kind of hang out, relax. And they also take care of it themselves, the people in the neighborhood. So it's pretty nice. And here you have the Museum of Reclaimed Urban Space. This is a little museum. It was started in a squatted building, and it kind of retells this history of the neighborhood. It's very important. We're almost done with the tour. We're walking down now towards Avenue D. We'll have covered all the avenues. Let's go on the right side of the road. A couple of important landmarks out here. I'll show you here to the right. But over to the left, if you go north, you get to the Con Edison plant. One of the big Con Edison plants in New York City. Con Edison is one of the biggest, investor-owned, electricity companies in the country. But they basically run the energy for New York. So during Sandy, we're right next to the water. Water came up, screwed that power plant up pretty bad. So this whole area all the way down below 34th Street had no power because of it. And that's why he lived here to the north, called Consolidated Edison, because first it was a consolidated gas company. It dates back to the 1820s. It was a gas lighting company. And then it merged with the Edison company, Thomas Edison, electricity in the late 1800s. By the way, keep in mind, Edison was one of the 30 electric companies giving power to the city at the late 1800s. But it kind of emerged as, victorious or whatever. Today, it's the Consolidated Edison. And then over on Avenue D, all the way down here, you have the Jacob Riis houses, which is a housing project. Also keep in mind here, those were built in the 1940s. But the first house, there's the Con Ed plant, you see it? Yeah, keep in mind too, in the East Village over on Avenue A, between Avenue A and First, is the first housing project in the country. And it's called the First Houses. And they're still over there. Here, I want to show you guys this building here. This is kind of an interesting building. It's pretty cool, Art Deco. Also, Viennese Secessionist is the style as well. But I like to see the Art Deco in it. This area here, this building was actually built by the Bennett Cookie Company. They made the Wheatsworth crackers, but they also invented milk bones, the bones you give your dogs and stuff. Isn't that cool? This was one of their buildings, I guess, the factory. And then this building here, too, was the oldest building in Alphabet City. It's from the 1820s, 1827, actually, this was built. And this is back from when this was in dry dock area. So in the early 1800s, this was like land that was just being bought up from the Stuyvesants, who owned almost all this land here in the East Village. And this was created as a dry dock. The water used to come up much further, and it was a dry dock where boats would come up, and they'd fix them and tweak them, all that stuff. And this was built as one of those buildings. Then it was purchased by the Wheatsworth Company, later on, and it was added on to here in the 1920s. And this was their whole thing. It was sold to Nabisco in 1931, actually. Nabisco, they used to have their factory in the meatpacking district. Remember that? But anyways, it's not that anymore. It's now a storage unit, obviously. Pretty cool building. But that's it, man. We made it through all the way through Alphabet City. We didn't go through A, like I said. I covered that in the East Village one. Watch that one, you get more of an idea of what's going on. But this is Avenue D, and it's Jacob Riis, by the way, was a important reformer in the 1800s. He was one of the first people to use flash photography to highlight the conditions in the Lower East Side, and 5 Points helped change the area. Was also slightly racist, unfortunately, but I guess no one's perfect. All right, whatever. I'm not gonna say anything that's gonna get me in trouble. Anyways, this whole area, awesome area. I recommend you guys come check it out. A lot of cool stuff to do. So that being said, before we end the tour, please like, please subscribe, please, also please check out my Patreon. That really helps. I'm trying to grow this thing, like I've said a billion times. It really helps, and I really appreciate it. No amount is too small, and there's extras there. Isn't that cool? Extras. Well, we really packed some stuff in there, huh, Phil?
Yeah, man.
How do you feel about all this? Yeah? I feel like I didn't ask you enough. I didn't talk to you enough. You feel neglected?
Slightly, yes.
I'm sorry. Well, I'll take you for an empanada after this.
All right, sounds good.
All right. Well, that's the tour, guys. We did it. You can also reach out to me for a tour if you'd like. Happy to show you around if you're ever in New York. But yeah, covered a lot of stuff. See y'all later. Sick.